Inside episode 35 on Outsourcing Live, I interview one of the world's leading podcasting experts who has used virtual assistants to help him grow his business, which is on track to achieving a net worth of $1 million by 2015. Also, in the Insider Info section, I share with you a simple tool that will allow you to centralize any of your support inquiries. Alright, let's rock the music.
Want to get tons of leads from YouTube without breaking a sweat? Outsourcing.
Go again.
This is Outsourcing Live with Tyrone Shum. Outsourcing the hard stuff so you can focus on the fun stuff.
Hey, and welcome to this next podcast on Outsourcing Live. I'm your host, Tyrone Shum, and it's so exciting to have you on. Now, if you've been a regular follower, I know that you've probably been missing me because I haven't been recording or uploading any new podcasts for the last few weeks or so. And I'll share with you shortly the reasons why behind that. But I'm actually back into it now, and I'm going to try and do my best to continue to record and broadcast regularly on a weekly basis to get some new podcasts out for you, particularly interviews and also stuff about outsourcing, so that way you can continue to learn more about this area of the industry. Now, the reasons why I've been pretty much on the last few weeks not been having much time to focus on the podcast and also with outsourcinglive.com in general is because I have another arm of my business, which is a very much focus on SEO and also web development and video SEO for clients. And more recently, I've had a lot of corporate clients actually just approach me and I've taken them on. And with that kind of work we're coming in, it is a substantial amount of income that's coming into our business. So I do need to focus a lot more time to help them and to work with them. And I know that that kind of business as well is a lot more time consuming, but we know that the returns, because it's a residual income, is actually going to be great for us. And a majority of the work, once it's all set up, is pretty much run and automated in-house with our team here. So that's what I've been really focusing on in the last few weeks, and that's the reason why I haven't had much time to focus on here. And that's been one of the major projects. In addition, with these new corporate clients that have come into the business, I've also had to restructure my team. So by doing that, I've actually seen a huge growth and change in the way we do things. And therefore, I've seen that the business changed from where it was before, which was having a really good team there already, but to actually systemize things even further so that it makes things faster and therefore a lot more less hands-off for me. And also, I am in preparation, as I've mentioned in the previous podcast, on taking some time off to take a holiday with my wife. So it's become even more necessary for me and my team to actually take me out of the business and just run without me. So that's really the reasons why these things have been in place. And now with these new systems and new team members as well, and a restructuring of what we've been doing, I'm hoping to see a lot more automation throughout, and you'll notice that things should come out a lot quicker. Now, in the future episodes, I'll also keep you up to date of what's going on, and I'll start to share with you a little bit more about some details and give you some examples of what's going on within regards to outsourcing, video SEO, search engine optimization of websites, and also web development as well. So yeah, that's what's been happening. All right. On top of that, I'm really excited today in this special interview I'm actually doing. And this is a really good friend of mine who I only just met over the podcast, but we've developed a really strong relationship and connection because we both are also Christian believers and we talk about God quite a lot. So before and even after the podcast that we went through together in this interview, we talked a lot about the theme of Christianity and also God. But that wasn't really the interview. The interview was actually to get him onto this call today to share with you his knowledge on how he's gone about hiring virtual assistants, because he's gone through this in the past and he shared with me with some information that he's had how he's approached this process. And I thought this is perfect because we are talking about outsourcing and we are also talking about how to be able to find the right people with regards to using virtual assistants. So let me introduce you to the world leading expert in podcasting, Cliff Ravenscraft.
Thank you very much, Tyrone. I'm so glad to be here and look forward to this conversation. I've had a lot of fun experiencing the world of virtual assistants, and I'm very passionate about this world. So I'm glad to have the conversation.
That's awesome. And it's been a real honor to be able to have you on the podcast today because I myself have been following you, and a lot of my friends online, like Pat, Leslie, and all those guys, talk about you all the time. So I'm so excited to actually have you on today, and exciting to be able to share some good stuff. So what I wanted to do is let's just jump into a little bit more about your background first. For the people who don't know you and who haven't actually been following Cliff on Podcast Answer Man, which you need to do that. Definitely share with us a little bit more about where you got started, and also a little bit more towards the journey of how you start off with also hiring virtual assistants going back a few years ago.
All right. Well, let me see if I can give you the 3-minute or less version of the story.
Sounds good.
All right. So let's just start off with, I used to be an insurance agent, worked in a family-run insurance agency for 11 years, was very successful, and was doing great there. And in fact, I enjoyed and very much loved the work that I was doing until I started podcasting as a hobby. In December 2005, I launched my very first podcast. It was a hobby devoted to the TV show Lost. It was called the Weekly Lost Podcast. And that show took off far faster than I could have ever imagined. And it's actually out of it's out of the norm of what normally would happen. By the third episode, we had thousands of subscribers, and people were begging me to produce regular content. People were sending me money saying, "Hey, go buy better equipment because because the audio quality isn't all that great." And they're right. I literally started podcasting for as little as $45, as out of pocket is what it cost me.
Yep.
And over time, we created weekly shows, and we built a community around what we were doing. And here's a little bit of a background about me. Prior to getting into podcasting, and even though I was a full-time insurance agent, I also have a background in Christian ministry. So I've been involved in Christian ministry since 1996. I was once an associate pastor of a little Nazarene church. And so I've always had a heart and a desire to serve people, to encourage people, to help inspire people, and to have a positive impact on people's lives. And I was doing that through insurance, one person at a time. I would actually sit down and have people come in, and I would talk to them about life insurance and preparing for their family and helping them understand getting out of debt and, investing in term life insurance for X number of years while you're working on getting out of debt and saving so you can actually prepare to where you don't need life insurance one day. And I was helping people one person at a time.
That is awesome.
And I had this dream. I had a dream maybe one day I might actually be involved in ministry where I might be in charge of something to where I'm helping more people. But, I didn't. If that came, that would be fine. What happened with my Lost podcast, we did not approach the television show Lost as a Christian couple. My wife and I were doing the show together. But instead, we very much just covered the show as fans of the show. Yeah. And people would write us emails saying, "Hey, Cliff, I listen to you and your wife and the way that you communicate. I have this sneaking suspicion that you guys are Christians. Am I right?" Yeah. And so I would write back. I said, "Well, yeah, you're right." And absolutely. And then all of a sudden we would get emails, like 3, 4, 5-page emails of people and their experience of why they left the church or why they have never been able to really accept what faith is.
Nice. Yeah.
And they started to ask me questions. And what I found is I was spending somewhere between 2 to 8 hours a day, and this is not an exaggeration, as little as 2, as much as 8 hours a day, every single day, answering emails. And some of it was technical, some of it was just fun, but most of it was really life-changing, ministry-related conversations through email. And we started to create more shows. I realized that, I didn't want to. I started to get the same kind of questions over and over again. So I launched 2 other shows. One show was called My Crazy Life. The other one was called the About the Church podcast at the time. Both of those have been rebranded. One is now the My Crazy Life. I just recorded episode number 513 on this thing today. It's now called Pursuing a Balanced Life.
Yes.
And then the About the Church podcast today is now called the Encouraging Others Through Christ podcast. But what would happen was people would ask questions, and I would get the same questions. I said, "Do you mind if I read your question and respond to it in a podcast?" And I would say, "I can leave your name out if you'd like." And some people would say, "Yeah, I'd like it if you'd leave my name out." Some say, "I don't care if you leave my name in." And that's what would happen is I would take their questions and I would actually get behind a microphone and share the answers. And lo and behold, they're not alone. They have the same questions. I have the same questions. And instead of having the average Christian programming on the radio where the people always have all the answers. Because the fact is nobody has all of the answers, but we all have the same questions.
Yep, absolutely.
And so it's all about sharing our experiences. And so what happened was I fell in love with this idea of sharing my life online. And it was through podcasting that I understood what my mission and purpose in life is. And all of my years and all of my Christian training in my training in ministry, I never knew what my purpose was until podcasting came along. And I know what I was created for, and that is to entertain, to educate, to encourage, and to inspire other people. And I will tell you what, when I learned that I do it most when I get behind a microphone and I hit the record button. I become a whole different person, and not a different person like a fake person, because I'm very genuine, I'm very authentic, but I come alive.
Yep.
It's just like, wow, this is like pure energy.
I can definitely see that.
And I love it. So I get behind the microphone, and what happens is, at the time I was, going to work as an insurance agent, and I no longer liked the helping people one-on-one, like the one person at a time. It became miserable. And I got to the place where my job actually became a soul-sucking career. I was making tons of money. I had just gotten completely out of debt, minus our mortgage. But still, we had paid off tens of thousands of dollars in debt thanks to the Dave Ramsey plan. Oh, by the way, we did a podcast episode talking about our debt issues, talked about the Dave Ramsey plan, and that was like 5 years ago. And today we're still getting emails and calls on our voicemail feedback hotline of people telling me, a couple years ago you did this podcast, and I just wanted to call you before we called Dave Ramsey and tell you we're debt free.
Yay!
So it's awesome. And people who, Stephanie and I shared a lot of our struggles from the first year of our marriage. We talked about marriage seminars, notes that we had taken during some of the marriage conferences that we've gone to. We've had people write in and tell us their marriage had, people have gone back to their wife or to their husband after being separated. People who have been, on the outs, their marriages have been. It's like, this is what I want to commit my life to, and this is the odd thing for me, and it's what blows a lot of people's mind is what I'm doing today. I have come to the place, and it took years to get where I am now, but I'm very financially successful doing what I'm doing right now. But I never got into this for the money.
Yep.
Matter of fact, I left guaranteed money to pursue this. In fact, I was a family-run insurance agency. It's my stepdad that owns the agency, and it's not just like my stepdad. My stepdad's been my dad since I was 5 years old. So it's that kind of relationship.
Wow.
And I had all the paperwork in place. Had I not left my career in insurance in January 2008, I would be making about $650,000 a year right now as the owner of the agency.
That is a big, big thing to leave and actually take forward. And just from hearing from your voice and your enthusiasm and your motivation, I know God has done something amazing for you to be able to put you in a position to be able to impact so many lives around the world. That's amazing calling. So it's turned into more of a Christian podcast right now more than anything else. But I'm a firm Christian believer as well too. And I know that God has put us onto this planet to pursue to actually serve others and also to serve Him, to be able to help Him spread His word as far and as wide as possible. And I definitely can see that happen through you as well.
Absolutely. And I promise you that while this has a very Christian, this is that little, like I said, the beginning of the story, but I'll just tell you that I started to have people say, man, Cliff, you are to do this full time. And I'm like, whatever. You can't make a living doing what you love and stuff like that. Who's ever going to pay me to do this? And people started to ask me if I could help them. And I was helping people for free and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden that got to be so time consuming and answering all these emails. And I started talking to people in my podcast back then it was called My Crazy Life. But I would tell people just walking, as I was out walking, just sharing what's on my heart. I have this dream that one day, maybe after my dad retires, maybe after the business is mine and I make it this thing, and maybe I'll just sell the insurance. And then when I don't have to worry about making money, I'll do podcasting full time. And everybody who was listening to me, and I had people who are very successful business people who says, listen, Cliff, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to make it in insurance. Not with the way, maybe if you had never found podcasting, you would have been a great financial success in insurance. But because you found your true purpose and calling in life, it's not, and you know for a fact it's not insurance, you would have never been able to be a success there. Pursue podcasting. I'm telling you, that's where it at. And I kept coming home and telling my wife this. And I'm like, they're crazy, right? And she goes,
Yeah.
well, one day my wife comes to me and she says, you have to leave your career in insurance. I had a just really terrible day. I gotten to the place in my insurance career where I didn't want to get up in the morning, and all I could think about is going to bed at night. I have a wife and 3 kids, and that was my daily existence, unless I was recording a podcast. But I had given up podcast. I got to the place where I realized I either need to give up podcasting and just put everything back in my career in insurance, because it was going to the tubes. I mean, it was getting really bad. Or I needed to leave insurance and I need to pursue podcasting full time, which we all know that's not going to happen. So I quit podcasting for 1 week.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say for a few months or year.
I quit podcasting for 1 week. It was the most miserable week of my life. And my wife told me, you have to quit your job in insurance and pursue podcasting full time. And we sit down and had a conversation. I told her, I said, I have no understanding of how to run a business. I have no idea how I'd make money. She says, I don't care. We're debt free. I believe God's put us in this place to where we can actually pull this off. And I'll save you and spare you all the boring details. Well, actually, none of them are boring, but I'll save you all the.
This is an amazing story. I keep going. I'm listening, enjoying this so much.
In 2008, I personally brought in personal income $11,000 for the entire year. We're a single income family. It's my wife, myself, and we have 3 young kids. And in 2008, I went from making $87,000 plus per year down to $11,000.
I don't know how you survived. How did you survive with 3 kids too?
You know what? There are hundreds of episodes of my crazy life. If you want to, you can go all the way back to 2008 and listen to them. Because I certainly shared, and that's one of the reasons why people felt so drawn to me in my story. Because people either love to hear really inspiring success stories, and everybody knows it's kind of interesting to watch a train wreck. And I was going to be one or the other, right? And so I shared, and people joined me on the journey. And God blessed me with many people to be wonderful advisors. But it was tough. I will tell you, it was the most difficult year financially of my life ever. In January, we lived off of my income from December. In February, we lived off of my Christmas bonus from the prior year. In March, April, and May, we lived off of my tax refund from the year before that. I was able to pay myself just a little bit of money. Wow. In June, but it was just enough to get me by while I went over to my accountant guy and told him I needed to withdraw $14,000 out of my pension. Actually, I needed $10,000 to live on the rest of the year. I was going to pay $4,000 in taxes and penalties. And he said, and everybody told me, this is the stupidest thing you could ever do, Cliff. Go out and get a business loan. I said, I do not believe in debt. I will not go into debt. I have a lot of money in my pension. I'm taking out $14,000. I don't care how stupid it is. Of course, a couple months after I did that, guess what happened to the stock market?
It crashed.
It crashed. I made out. I made tons of money in that one. But anyway, the thing is how did we survive? $11,000. Now, the thing is, the business always made enough money to pay its overhead.
Okay, that's good.
And the business always made enough money to pay for my health insurance. The business always, but as far as personal income, writing myself a paycheck from Ravenscraft Enterprises LLC, $11,000 total. That's my W-2 statement. So, but the thing is I also had $10,000 from my pension that came in. And that allowed me to take the last few months of 2008 and say, you know what? I will not take any and every job that comes my way. I will only take things that are focused on podcasting. Mm-hmm. Because if it's not related to podcasting, yes, I know how to create a YouTube channel. Yes, I know how to create a fan page. Yes, I know how to teach you how to use Twitter. And yes, I know how to create your WordPress site and design it to look a little bit nicer than what you currently have. But unless you have a podcast or want to create a podcast, I will not work with you, because I want people to hear the name Cliff Ravenscraft and think podcasting. I don't want to hear, well, who created that fan page? Cliff Ravenscraft, he's the greatest. No, Cliff Ravenscraft won't talk to you unless you do podcasting. That's it. And today, if the word podcasting comes up in a conversation just about anywhere in the world, I'm about 80% positive, but that my name will eventually come up in the conversation.
Oh, and it has. It has many, many times, especially in the circles that we know. So it's amazing to be able to hear that story because one, it's a truly inspirational story that I am just inspired. I'm like sitting here, wow. I don't know if I could have gone through with what you've done, especially when you've got a family and you've got to support them as well. I don't know, my wife would have been supportive doing exactly what you've done, but I don't know. Personally, I would have struggled. I could definitely.
Oh, no, I struggled. I just want to say, by the way, it sounds all fun and exciting and inspiring right now. 2008, like I said, I have the podcast episodes. There were times when literally I was having panic attacks and I didn't go to sleep at night because I was afraid that if I went to sleep, I wouldn't wake up.
Oh, no.
It was
Wow.
that bad. There were times when I would pull, by the way, I was working somewhere between 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, the first 6 months. Okay. So if people, this is what it took. And by the way,
Wow.
bringing in zero personal income. But you know what? It didn't matter. I was doing what I knew I needed to do. And I was learning the hard way how to do this thing called business. By the way, to this day, I still have no business plan. Zero. Now, the thing is, I may not have anything written, but up here and on these whiteboards, on the one whiteboard you can't see behind me, if I was to pursue everything that is on the board right now, conservatively, I could bring in $47,000 a month right now.
That's nice. That is a big change from 11,000 a year down up to 47,000 a month. And
Things changed in 2010.
Which is amazing. Well, the first thing, I guess, we've talked a lot about your background and also history about it and where you've ended up today. So coming to where you've arrived to actually have a successful business and to turn that around from podcasting, what was the reason why you had spent those 6 months producing? Like, what was it that you're doing to be able to lead to where you are? Because that's something that sort of now raised up a question for me, and I'm sure listeners are wondering, how did you turn this around?
Absolutely. Well, the one thing, a lot of prayer, but certainly
I agree.
the thing is I was like, how am I going to make money? And I was thinking, well, first I want to do one-on-one coaching and consulting. I feel like I have a very good talent for teaching people. At least that's what all the people who had hired me up to that point had told me. They said, you could make a lot of money. And every time I worked with somebody, you should charge more. Well, I will tell you, the first 6 months that I worked, I was only charging $50 an hour. Now, the thing is I look at $50 an hour now and I laugh at myself. But putting myself into my mindset that I had in 2008, I had spent 30 some odd years working as an employee, thinking that if you made $27 an hour, you're like, wow, you're making tons of money. Well, so for me to actually say, well, now I'm charging $50 an hour, I didn't believe, for some reason at that time, I struggled to believe that I was worth $50 an hour. So I spent most of my time every day of the week talking to people on the phone for free, trying to convince them to hire me for $50 an hour. Meanwhile, while convincing them that I'm worth $50 an hour, I've answered all their questions. So they no longer need to hire me. And the fact that the people who were very serious, unfortunately, because I didn't have the confidence that I was worth $50 an hour, they sensed that right away and they didn't want anything to do with me. I can look back in hindsight and realize that, number one, my price was too low, and number two, I did not have the confidence for the price I was asking. Those two things led to disaster, and that's why I didn't do very well in 2008.
Wow, it's a mindset shift, isn't it? I think we all overcome these challenges as we grow into our business. I'm exactly the same. I went through that stage as well. I was charging about $50, $65 an hour, and now, obviously, with our consulting and type of businesses, we know that we value a lot more. But it's that mind shift, isn't it,
Yep.
to be able to change that?
When I went to $95 an hour, I started to close about 40% of the people I talked to. When I went to $150 an hour, I closed probably right around probably about 70 to 80% of the people I talked to. I went to 200 for a very short period of time. Today, as we're recording this Wednesday, February 22nd, 2012, my rate is currently $300 an hour. And I never talk to anybody on the phone to close them. If somebody contacts me today and says, "Hey, Cliff, I was referred by so-and-so, and I wanted to see if we can talk on the phone to find out if you might be able to help me with such and such." And what I do is I very kindly say, I have a pre-written thing that pretty much says that, "Hey, I can't tell you how much it means to me that somebody's referred you. It's my favorite way to do business. I very much would love to help you. However, your message seems to indicate that you're not quite sure whether or not I'm able to help you. My recommendation is that you first go to learnhowtopodcast.com. There's a free 2-hour tutorial so you can see the level of work at which I do. And if that hasn't convinced you, I encourage you to go listen to the most recent 1 or 2 podcast episodes that I have online at podcastanswerman.com. And after all of that, if you are not 100% convinced that I am the person to work for you, then you should not even bother hiring me.
That's amazing. It really filters out pretty much anyone who isn't serious. And then when they are, you pretty much...
I close 100% of my $300 per hour.
That's excellent.
And I'm currently booked 3.5 weeks in advance right now.
That's fantastic. Well, that is an amazing inspirational story. Well, Cliff, let's change it up a bit. As we've talked about your background's been amazing, and thank you so much for sharing that with the audience and for people listening. What I wanted to get you onto the call today was really about your journey and your successes with working with virtual assistants. Because prior to that, leading up to 2008, all the way to 2010, you did start a podcast, which was a virtual assistant podcast. And you went through your journeys and so forth. What was the reason why you started that up, and what did you learn along the way?
Sure. Well, the reason why I started it up starts with my own virtual assistant journey. I'd heard about people talking about these things called VAs, and I always heard people call them VAs. And I'm like, what the heck is a VA? A VA? I thought that was a veteran in a hospital.
Originally too.
So, but I always heard it in the context of like an assistant in somebody that you pay, and it sounds like an employee. But I really could care less because I didn't, it's like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a solopreneur. I'll never need help for anything. I do everything myself because I am Superman and I can do it all. And what I can't do, I'll still do because I am dedicated to what I do.
I like that, actually. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work for us.
It did not work for me either. So what happened was I started to hear a little bit more. I read The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss. Everybody loves it. I really enjoyed the book, The 4-Hour Workweek. However, the section on virtual assistants convinced me that I thought it was the worst thing that could have ever happened to the face of this earth. I literally came away from that section of that book. And again, Timothy Ferriss, if you're watching, let me tell you, I love the book 4-Hour Workweek, but I came away from that section of the book thinking virtual assistants is absolutely horrendous. Nobody should ever do this. Because in my mind, I'd always been hearing about the American-centric version of everybody's losing their jobs because everybody's outsourcing. So already there's this negative connotation in my mind that's been programmed by other people, the media, about outsourcing. And this section of Timothy Ferriss's book seemed to confirm it for me, because in his book there are 2 things. One, he says even if you don't need to hire a virtual assistant, you should hire one just so you can get used to bossing somebody else around.
Oh, gotcha. I see that point. That was,
that bugged me. That really crawled under my skin, and I did not like it. And number 2, there was an example of what he shared about how he had his virtual assistant, who has very broken English, even in written language, had very broken English, who he made his assistant write an apology letter to his wife. And I read the way the letter was written, and I'm like, that is not even good grammar. I mean, I'm horrible. I'm horrible when I write a message, but man, there's no way on earth I would ever allow this person to communicate to one of my clients.
Or my wife, or your wife even too.
And well, we won't even go into how disdainful that is. But so I came away from that book thinking, this is something I'll never do. It turned me off to VAs forever, or so I thought.
Yes, that's what I thought too.
Okay, so I'm here's the thing. I started selling equipment, and if I can just give you this one little backstory of how I did this.
Yeah, go for it.
Things were really terrible for me in 2008, as you've heard. things were so bad that my wife was saying, you know what, I'll go out and get a job. I said, no, you won't. I said, I'll tell you what, Dave Ramsey talks all the time about people going out and getting pizza jobs. I'll go deliver pizzas a couple hours, a week, and I'll bring in a little bit. And I thought about that. If I work 15 hours a week delivering pizzas, and what's that going to bring in? About, after taxes, maybe $350 a month?
Yeah, not much.
Well, finally, I had been putting it off, but finally I got to the place. I should probably go and see if I can put some applications in delivering some pizzas. Well, the day that I was going to leave to do that, my phone rings because I had my phone number on my site at the time. And, this guy says, hey, Cliff, I hear that you have equipment that you sell. And I said, I do. And he says, well, I would like to know if you can help me out and find what I'm doing. This is what I want to do with a podcast. He says, now I have a very limited budget. And I'm like, oh, gosh, not one of these guys again. He's going to tell me he wants to do all of this stuff and he's only got $200 to spend. And I sit there, I said, so what's your budget? And he says, I've got $15,000.
I love
and I'm
this
like,
one.
oh my gosh. Okay. And well, the thing is at the end of the call, he had spent about, I don't remember what it is, it's about $2,500. But here's what I do know. My commission on that, I probably spent maybe 15, 25 minutes with him on the phone. And I made $300 and some odd dollars in commission, in profit, not commission, because I actually am a direct reseller and I buy the equipment at a lower cost and sell it at a higher cost. So it was pure profit. I made over $300, and I'm like, I just spent 25 minutes with somebody, and I made the exact amount of money if I was to work 15 hours a week delivering these pizzas. I'm not going to go. I'm going to hire myself, and I'm going to devote 20 hours a week to pushing equipment sales. And so it's like, you know what? I'm setting aside this time. I'm creating eBay stores. I'm looking up Amazon stores. I'm creating my equipment page, which, by the way, if somebody goes right now, go to Google and type in podcast equipment and find out what's number one.
You're number one, definitely.
So now the thing is what happened was I started selling tons of equipment. And I was giving, I was eager to get anybody to talk to. So I would give away a 30-minute consultation. And as long as you buy from me, there's no charge. And so I was working on equipment. After I got off the phone with it, I'd work on proposals. And I was talking on My Crazy Life, my podcast that I go out and record while I'm walking. And I was sharing with people, it's like, man, I'm getting burned out. Here's the thing. I just got mentioned by Dan Miller from 48 Days to the Work You Love. And all of a sudden, my phone is ringing off the hook, emails coming in. Everybody wants to hire me. And here I am selling equipment. And I don't have, I'm booked. I don't even have enough time in my schedule. So I'm putting people off 2 or 3 weeks now. And somebody wrote in, or actually called in some voicemail feedback and says, I got 3 words for you that'll revolutionize your life. And I said, what's that? He said, stop selling equipment. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way. I make $4,000 or $6,000 a month in profit. He says, okay, well, let's just take the average 5,000. And from what you've been telling me, you've been working approximately 40 hours a week in equipment proposals and talking to people and processing orders. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, take that times 12. Take that times 52 divided by 12. Now take this and this. He says, turns out I was making about $13 an hour in equipment sales.
Isn't that amazing? It comes back down to what Tim Ferriss shares about what is our time really worth. Well, I can't remember the 2 terms that he said. There's a actual value, and then there's some kind of other value. And the real value that we're actually worth has to actually divide it back down to the amount of hours that we spend on a particular job or particular consulting time. Whereas if we're earning residual passive income, it becomes a lot greater. So if you're not putting the hours in, but you're still earning $4,000 or $5,000 a month, your actual value could be worth a lot more than that. Got to look that up. I've got the book somewhere.
So what happened here is before here, and I hired my first virtual assistant before I shared that, I figured I'm going to, actually, this is what I did. I put out on Twitter, I put out a status message that says, I think I'm finally at the point where I'm going to have to look into hiring a virtual assistant.
This is where it bites you back in the foot.
Yep. And so I just put that on Twitter. Wasn't looking for a response, but of course, what do people do? They monitor Twitter for things like that.
Yes.
And so a bunch of virtual assistants replied me and tried to direct message me if I followed them, which I didn't. So I got a bunch of at replies, but only one person, her name was Andrea Schumann, and she emailed me. But she didn't email me right away. The email came in the next day after I sent this Twitter message. And it said, "Hey Cliff, my name is Andrea Schumann. I'm a virtual assistant for this firm. And by the way, I saw your Twitter message. I didn't know anything about you prior to seeing that, but I do a keyword search and I follow this. I've looked at your site. I've listened to about 4 hours worth of your podcast. I've browsed through everything. Wow, you have an amazing story." And she gave me like a 5-paragraph email that clearly communicated that she knew who I was. She goes, "I want to be your virtual assistant." And I said, "You know what? I said that out of frustration. To be honest with you, I'm not interested in a VA." And she said, and I said, "But I'll tell you what, you seem kind enough. If you're willing, I'd love to just schedule a conversation with you on the phone. Maybe I can ask you a couple questions." She said, "Sure thing." We got on the phone. We talked for about 90 minutes, and I fell in love with this person's attitude and the fact that she knew so much. And she seemed like, wow, I want nothing more than to see you succeed. Well, next thing you know, I said, give me about a couple days to think about this. And I had a decision. Do I want to hire her a couple blocks of hours at a time? Or she said, there's an option to sign up for this retainer, 20 hours a month.
Yep.
I decided, you know what? If I don't sign up for a retainer, I'm never going to give you work. But if I prepay and know I'm going to get 20 hours, I'm going to force myself to find you 20 hours of work.
Yes.
So I signed on for a retainer. My life had never been better. I taught her how to do all of my equipment sales, and it was just going like clockwork. Now, the thing is eventually I still got to the point where it was too much, and I did stop equipment sales for 2 months while I focused on building up my consulting one-on-one. But the thing is as I came back, I said, you know what? I'm going to reintroduce equipment sales, but only packages. I won't do proposals unless you're paying me my hourly rate to talk to you, and it's a minimum of 1 hour, and I'll build you a custom package, and you don't have to buy it from me. You can if you want, or you can go anywhere you want. But proposals are done. Packages are in, and I had 5 of them. Today I only have 1 package, by the way.
That makes life a lot easier. Definitely.
It sure does. And the reason why I only have 1 package is because honestly, today I don't have a virtual assistant. So how do we get from there to here, or from there, to there to here?
From there to here, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I hire Andrea. I have her on for my retainer. The first 3 weeks, I am already freeing up hours and hours and hours of my life. She's doing things. It took a lot to train her up front. It really did. I spent more time training her than it would, like 4 times the amount of time training her than it would have taken me to do all the jobs myself. But it's like I paid retainer. I've already paid for the hours. I don't know what else I'm just going to say, get on the GoToMeeting and watch me do all this stuff and take notes, and I'm going to create a workflow for you, and we'll figure this out together. And she did. And she was doing wonderful. Then she says, well, gosh, Cliff, I heard on your podcast, because she's listening to my podcast. And she's doing this in her free time, by the way. I'm not paying her to listen to my podcast. She says, I was listening to your podcast, and you said that you wanted to host a lost party. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, would you like me to set that up for you? And I'm like, why, yes, I would. And it's like, this is amazing. And she goes, would you like me to get some press for your events? And I'm like, well, yes, I would.
Wow.
And the next thing you know, I'm on the front page of the Cincinnati Enquirer and the Kentucky Post. I'm on all the radio stations and ABC Radio News and all this other stuff. And she's taking care of all this stuff for me. And not only that, but she's doing so much more, so many more things that I had her doing. She's actually following up on invoices that aren't paid. I don't have to do that anymore. She's very kind, very personable. She's following up on those invoices. I know she's doing it well. People were calling to say, hey, Cliff, I'd like to talk to you. Can I hire, to see if you're right for me hiring? She was my buffer. I called her my gatekeeper. Yeah. And things were amazing. And so my life had been so radically changed. I became so passionate about virtual assistants that I believed that people, small to medium-sized business owners, needed to know how awesome having a virtual assistant could be, because it doesn't have to be this very, inhumane, all outsourcing thing where everybody's treated like crud. That's not what it's about. It is very reputable. It's great, and it's not even just in the United States, but even in the Philippines and India, it is possible to hire people and do well for them, to actually benefit them and they benefit you. I've always stayed in the USA personally, but that's just who I am and my experience. So what happened was I had gone to my VA and said, I want to talk to the president of your firm. And she's like, why? Because I said, I'm going to create a podcast called the Virtual Assistant Podcast, and I want them to sponsor it. And she goes, oh, Cliff, she's a hard sell, but I'll set up the call for you. I said, and so I basically went to Podcast Answer Man audience and said, guys, I'm going to create a podcast about virtual assistants. If you have ever heard about them, but you have questions, call me, leave a message as if you're leaving it for the Virtual Assistant Podcast. Because if I decide to launch this thing, I will answer your questions first. I got like 15 calls that came in with questions. I got her on the phone and I said, here's what I want to do. This is who I am. I'm going to create a podcast. It's going to be called the Virtual Assistant Podcast. I didn't even have a website up yet. And I said, but I'm going to do this for 3 months, and I'm going to answer people's questions. And I'm either going to do this and maybe give 1 episode a month for free, and people have to pay a part of a membership to gain access to all of it, or people are going to get every single episode for free because of your generous sponsorship.
Very smart.
And I said, now here's the thing. Before you give me an answer, let me tell you the kind of questions that are coming in. And of course, I have the ability right here to play questions right over the phone. And that's exactly what I did. I played her one question after another. I said, these people are desperately waiting for me to answer their questions, and thousands of people are going to get these answers. And she says, where do I sign up? And so that's where the Virtual Assistant Podcast came from. Wow. And I created that show. I had originally only intended to do it for maybe 3 months. But at the end of the 3 months, they're like, we want to renew. And I'm like, okay. So we renewed. And it turns out that I did it for, I think it was almost a year. I did 38 weeks worth of episodes.
That's right.
And right around 32, I was like, my virtual assistant was actually coming up with all the content for me to come up with, because at that point, it wasn't that I lost my passion for having a virtual assistant. It was just the fact that I've shared everything. I've shared it. I feel really good. So the 38 episodes that are there are still there, and it's going great. People still find it and come into Podcast Answer Man after that. But here's the thing. Why don't I have a virtual assistant today? After about 12 months of having Andrea as my virtual assistant, she ended up having some things going on that she needed to leave to focus on some other things. Yep. And I'll be honest with you, I was heartbroken and devastated. And it happened at a very bad point in my life because I was sick at the time, and it was Christmas time, and it's like, wow, this couldn't be in a worse place. This is actually detailed in the final 4 or 5 episodes of the Virtual Assistant Podcast. And so I shared, but the cool thing is I'm glad it happened before the end of the podcast, because then what I was able to do was share with people the thing is, she found me. I didn't find her. And I was convinced after talking to her, she was the right person for helping me. Yeah. When it came to replacing her, I was with my retainer wasn't with her. My retainer was with a firm. So they were going to, quote unquote, just suggest a new replacement for me. And I said, no, hold the phone here. This is not how this is working. What you can do is I will give you the outline of all the things I'm looking for, all the qualifications that I want in a virtual assistant. You can then go through all of your VAs and submit 3 of them to me, and I will individually interview each one of them for the position. Yes. And I did. I got on the phone with the first person. I knew within 10 minutes I didn't want to hire the person. I just knew. Yep. The second person, I'm like, wow. And to be honest with you, when I got into the third person, right at the beginning of the call, I just told her, I said, you know what? It doesn't matter what you say. You could be the most awesome person in the world. I've already made my decision. I'm hiring the second person I talked to. Yeah. And that person, her name was Amy Sadler, and she was out of this world. Thing is, Andrea was great, and Andrea was great on this phone. She had those personal skills. She had those things where I could turn customers over and talk to on the phone and all of that stuff. Amy, not as much. I mean, she could have, but she wouldn't have. She wouldn't have had. Andrea had this motherly feel to her. She felt like,
very
you know,
personable, could talk to anyone.
yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, Amy was amazing in other ways. She was a technical goddess.
I love it.
It didn't matter what I threw at her. It didn't take but minutes. I mean, she could pick up something technology wise as quick as I could, and that is hard to find.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
so it was amazing. All of a sudden, I had her producing all of my shows. We were using Dropbox, we were using mind maps, we were shared mind maps. We were using all kinds of shared web resources. She was on call via Skype, you know, most of my every business hour that I was there. It was just awesome. And unfortunately, she got pregnant with her third child.
Oh, okay.
And this is why I don't have a virtual assistant today. Again, it has to happen at a very critical time in my
Doesn't
business.
God make things so much fun for us?
Yes. So, and both of these, by the way, both of them happened in December. I don't know what's going on there, but anyway, what happened with Amy is she was getting ready to have her third child, and she told me she was going to go on maternity leave, and I'm like, okay, I'll deal with this. And they were going to find a replacement for her, and it was going to be, you know, she told me that it was only going to be 4 weeks. She wasn't going to take the full 6 weeks off. And I said, well, you know what? To be honest with you, I don't want to train somebody else to do that. I'll do everything that you were doing for 4 weeks. And when you come back, I'll give it to you. Well, then all of a sudden, it's like my virtual assistant firm says, hey, it's time for renewal of your contract at the same time that she is on maternity leave. And the rates went up like $6 an hour. And by that time, I've already raised my retainer package to 30 hours. So 30 times 6, that's a lot of extra money, especially due to the fact that the first month that I would pay that new, much higher rate, I have no help at all. Not because they didn't offer it, but because I refused it.
And also, you got to train that new person up as well too. So that's more time spent.
Yeah. So the thing is, Amy was going to come back, but here's the thing. I mean, most people know, it's like, how do I know for a guaranteed fact that Amy's going to come back after the third child? What if there are complications? I don't know. And so I was faced with, do I renew this contract? And I'm like, you know what? I negotiated with them. They actually even offered me a lower price. And I said, I'll tell you what, once Amy comes back, if I haven't found somebody else to help me, you know, to take over what she was doing for me, then when Amy comes back, I want her back and I'll pay the higher rate. But if I find somebody, I'm just going to deal with whatever I find. Well, what happened was, you know, I was at the place where I had 3 different people that I was looking to hire. They were not technically virtual assistants, but they were going to be hired for me as a virtual assistant if I were to hire one of them. And they were going to actually start doing that kind of work for other people. And I had known these people. And then all of a sudden, my wife she had been trying to homeschool. And both of our kids that were homeschooling at the time, they said, we want to go back to school at this time.
Okay.
And Stephanie's like, you know, she goes, well, and I said, well, if you want to, how about you work for me 20 or 30 hours per month in the business? And she's like, I would love that. And of course, that means the money I was paying there, I could just add to my paycheck.
Yep, that's right. And
So-
therefore, it's in the family. It still retains. Plus, your wife, you know, loves you so much. She'd want to do that for you.
Yep. And it's been great. She's been my assistant now. And I don't call her my assistant most of the time. Matter of fact, I hardly ever call her my assistant, but she's doing that work. And she does it extremely well, just as good as anybody else had done it. And it works out great. And of course, the cool thing is that, you know, we're husband and wife, and that gives us a further bond, and it brings her a little bit more into the business side of things, because she's very much my partner in all of this. I mean, none of this would have ever happened if it weren't for her encouragement for me to pursue this. So it's really been great for us. You know, the thing is our business is beyond awesome right now. I mean, it's just amazing. God has just blown my mind. And my goal for 2015, one of the 15 goals that I have this year, is to build a team.
You mean?
Yeah, 2012.
I was thinking 3 years. Wow, you planned that far ahead?
Actually, I do have a goal for 2015. That's why I keep saying that. Actually, I have 14 goals for 2012. the final goal, number 15, I added to the board. It's to become a millionaire by the end of 2015, which will happen. But anyway, I have 14 goals. One of the goals on my board for 2012 is to build us to a team of 5. My wife and I consider ourselves to be a team of 2 running all of this stuff now, and I want to add 3 more people. And I've always been opposed to the idea of an employee, although after reading E-Myth Revisited, talking with some very successful personal advisors that I have, I'm not opposed to the idea of an employee anymore. But I can assure you that I will have a minimum of 1 virtual assistant, if not 2, and possibly a 3rd. But chances are it'll be 1 or 2 VAs and an employee by the end of this year if I pursue everything that I'm going to pursue.
That's fantastic. So I know when you're talking about virtual assistants, those were local people in the States that were actually working for you virtually, right?
That's correct. Yes. What I would consider to be, I can't think of the term I used all the time. But anyway, yes, here in the States, one was in Missouri and the other one was originally she ended up being in Nashville, Tennessee. So yeah. I'm in Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, so basically it is virtually, you're able to talk to them virtually from anywhere, but they were able to speak to your customers directly because they had access to phone and so forth. So kind of essentially they were like your employees of your business except working virtually from another location.
That's one thing I would love to share with your audience, Tyrone, and I'm sure you've shared this many times because I did 38 episodes of of the Virtual Assistant podcast. I literally have thousands and thousands of people around the world who ask me my thoughts on virtual assistants. And so it's kind of become an extended part of, it's like a cousin of my brand, Podcast Answer Man. But here's the biggest thing that always comes up. People want to know what, I hear my community ask each other. It's like, I know Cliff had 2 good experiences with VAs, but I want to know, does anybody else have good experience? What has your experience been? And the question always comes down to 2 things. Where did you hire the people from, such as in the States or what other country?
Yeah.
And how much did you pay them? And then all of a sudden somebody says, well, I heard so-and-so had a really terrible experience. Or somebody tries having a virtual assistant and they themselves have a terrible experience. And they say, I'm done, either based upon my own one horrible experience or the stories I've heard of other people's horrible experience, that I will never, ever again try to hire a VA again. And I think this is ridiculous. Here's my thing. I want everybody to know this. A virtual assistant is no different than an employee when it comes to the human being that you are hiring.
Spot on.
It is a human being. Here's the thing. In my 30 years prior to running my own business, even in my years before going into my family's insurance agency, I worked at a lot of different places as an employee. And guess what? There were places where I was a terrible employee, and there were places where I was an awesome employee. I was the best employee. And it's like, wait a second, I'm the same person. Sure, I changed a little bit over time and I grow personally, but no, seriously, I was a horrible employee at this company, a great employee at this company, relatively the same exact person. How is that? Number one, some people, some of it is this job a good fit for my personal talents, skills, and all of this other stuff? Also, do I work well in the environment that you're offering? Number 2, is your job description you've given me clear and concise? And number 3, have you trained me well to do the job? So some of it could be that I'm not a good fit for your job business, that you have for me or for your business, or it could be that you're a lousy person at teaching and training me what you want to do, or you've given me a horrible environment that you've brought me into. So therefore, I am a bad employee for you. And so the thing is, I'm the same Cliff Ravenscraft. So how can one person hire Cliff Ravenscraft and another person hire Cliff Ravenscraft and have 2 different experiences? It's because of all this other stuff. So you can't say, well, I hired a VA and it was terrible. It was the worst 3 months of my life and I will never do that again. It's like, could you imagine a business that literally required 5 employees to operate, and all of a sudden things are going pretty well, but they have one really bad experience with one of their employees, and they say, you know what, let's fire that let's get rid of all of these employees. We'll never hire another employee the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That business is going to go under.
Exactly.
Nobody ever says, well, I've heard so-and-so say they had a bad employee story, that employee stole from their cash register, and all of a sudden say to themselves, you know what? If I start a business, I'll never hire an employee because that's what's going to happen to me.
No, that
It's
never
no
happens.
different.
Yeah,
Nobody ever does that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing. People just don't learn from their mistakes. It's something that they haven't learned what to do. They haven't been able to manage the whole process properly, and that's the reason why it failed. It's actually not the process that fails. It's actually them who hasn't implemented the process properly. And that's absolutely true. I'm glad you shared that because I'm on the same views as you are.
Yeah, and the thing is the thing is if you're looking into hiring a virtual assistant, you want to ask the question of what people pay. You want to ask people what their experiences have been, where you hired from, and have you had a good experience. That's all great. But the thing is unless you're going to get their exact virtual assistant to do the exact same work that you do, and by the way, you create the same environment and you have the same personality as the person you're asking, then you'll never know whether or not that's going to be transferable to you. So here, those are still important things to investigate. But let me tell you what you need to investigate. What's the difference between an employee and a virtual assistant? And it's all comes down to what are the legal requirements? What are the ramifications of the location independence and all of the technology of how you communicate? Sure, those are the things you should be talking about, not whether or not somebody's had a good experience with a person. So there's so much more, but very few people ever investigate further beyond how much did you pay and where did you hire them from. And it's like, that's it. So, and the other big thing, if you're going to hire a virtual assistant from anywhere, go through that process no differently than if you were running a genuine, authentic business and you were looking to hire an employee that, by the way, is very difficult to fire, which a virtual assistant is not very difficult to fire because they're contracted workers. You just let them go like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is if they're an employee, it's hard to let them go. There are legal things that go into that.
Yeah.
And stuff. So, but here's the deal. You wouldn't just call up the temp agency and say, I've got this position. Here are the details of what I need, and they need to know how to do this, this, and this, and use this program. Now send me over an employee, and you hire them, right?
Mm.
Well, I guess some people might.
Some works, but most of the time that's not how it works.
Yeah. And so if you wouldn't do that with your business to hire an employee, why are you doing it with a virtual assistant firm?
Absolutely.
So you need to actually read some books and ask people, how do you interview people? What questions do you ask? What kind of job description have you written? So can I get a copy of your job description so I can kind of use it to model my own job description? Learn how to be a manager, a leader, and study those things, and then you'll be prepared to go hire a virtual assistant.
That's spot on, Cliff. I swear this is the best interview I've ever done about virtual assistants with you because you've come from so many experiences. And I think just to touch on that note, the thing is with the book, for example, 4-Hour Workweek, it made it sound so simple to do that because when I first started hiring a virtual assistant, I thought this is going to be easy. Go around and hire people. I failed for the first 2 times. It was only after my 3rd time to try again that I actually found the right person to be able to help me run my business and so forth. And it was a complete mental shift. If I didn't change my mindset and learn the process correctly, I think I'll probably still be stuck today and not even be talking about outsourcing at this point in time. So yeah, it's absolutely, I agree with you. And everything that Cliff has said, I totally highly recommend that you follow those simple steps there. Because if you follow these procedures right, I'm sure that you'll be able to find the right person. It's not the virtual assistant, but the right person for that role that you're hiring for, which is really great. So let's change it up a little bit, Cliff. What are your intentions, or what do you want to hire the virtual assistants for your business in the future? Because it'll be interesting to see what is it that now you're trying to form if you're going to form a 4 or 5-man team.
Absolutely. I'm going to have a live events coordinator. So their main responsibility will be to create live events where people will pay to come and participate in a weekend conference, let's just say down in Orlando, Florida, in Hawaii, or whatever the case may be. This is going to be a weekend intensive event. Maybe it'll be an online cruise where we talk about how to build your business from the ground up and how to engage and build a community around your business, how to effectively use podcasting and social media. And so people can come for, I don't know, $500, $600, $900 and have this amazing weekend experience. And it's a business write-off and a very cool location. So I want somebody
Nice.
I want somebody who's going to be able to take initiative and basically set up the RSVP page, who's going to book the hotel and get good rates, who's going to take care of all the administrative details of what food is going to be offered, and just communication and all of that stuff, and also maybe help with some of the aspects of marketing a little bit as well. But there'll be a lot. So one of my people might, their main responsibility would be live events coordinator. Another person I want to hire, this one I know here. Oh, by the way, another tip for people who are looking to hire a virtual assistant: if you want to have success right out of the gate, hire your virtual assistant, put them in charge of something that generates income as their first thing. So teach them how to do something that is immediately going to cause them to pay for themselves. And this is awesome. So one of the things that I know for a fact that if I'm the number one source on the web, on Google anyway, for podcast equipment, I get thousands and thousands of people every month that come into that page. And right now I only have one package, and I only have one package because I don't want to spend more than 15 minutes on the sale. And it comes through and it's systemized, right?
Yes.
But the thing is I could probably generate another $15,000 to $20,000 in profit if I had somebody who was solely dedicated to keeping all of the equipment stuff up and running and processing all the orders that were to come through. There's no question in my mind that I could do that. And the fact that I'm sitting here asking myself now, oh no, I do know why I haven't hired that person yet. It's just because right now life is crazy. But I will. By the end of the year, I will have somebody who is in charge of my equipment sales.
Can I ask, just to interrupt you about this equipment sales, do you physically have to store these products, or is it actually no? So you're just processing the orders. That's really what the time aspect is, the administration side for.
It's the so basically what I have is I have a supplier who has told me what my pricing on all the gear would be. They said to me that you can charge whatever you want. There is a minimum that you can advertise, which is not a problem. I usually charge the minimum advertised price, and that's what I charge. That's all what they see everywhere, and I make a very good profit on those orders. So so when an order comes in, it comes to me. I see that the payment's been made. I have to go in and actually confirm their shipping address, and then I actually go in and place the order with my supplier. I have a copy of that all on my side. I do a little bit of tracking in my high-rise contact management system. And then, of course, I have my wife go in and confirm that the order's been received by my supplier, and I have her check on the tracking information and submit that to the client. And occasionally, I mean, I've sold more than $200,000 worth of audio equipment. So occasionally there's been a couple items that have to be returned because they're dead on arrival. That's happened 3 or 4 times. Sometimes there's a Heil arm where the spring is not fully springable, if you will.
You gotta send that back.
So you have to actually make some phone calls and do some customer service work. And so there's a little bit of work involved in that. And I would like to get to the place where I could train somebody not only to do the system and to actually get back into eBay and get some other stores up and running for me, but also where I get to the point where they're so trained on podcast equipment that they could speak to it at the level of authority that I speak to it at. And then all of a sudden they can start doing custom proposals for me as well. So this is that one position that I could potentially see as an employee position, that because that's one that, man, that would just make me a ton of money. It would.
The other thing agree.
The other one is that, I've been toying around with this idea of hiring a virtual assistant on and saying, listen, if you think you're really great and you really have researched me and you think that I'm going to pretty much do pretty well for providing for you, how about this? No retainer, no anything like this. We'll have a contract, and I will give you a percentage of the profits of each order, of each of the orders that comes through. And that's their payment, nothing more. It's like, I don't owe you any. If no orders come through, I owe you nothing.
And it's a very good incentive there, because if you've already got a strong foundation and they already know what the sales figures are, they kind of already know how much they're going to earn anyway. which you've already got that base there. Yeah.
I'm sitting on a gold mine right now. And
You
the
are.
only reason I am not mining the gold is because I'm mining gold elsewhere. And I love the gold that I'm mining right now.
That is excellent. Wow, there's so much that we've talked about in terms of virtual assistants and how your business runs and so forth. But actually, I didn't ask you one thing. You talked a little bit about your wife, Stephanie, running the business at the moment. What is her hands-on role right now in your business as a assistant?
She handles all of my accounting work for me. So she takes our PayPal, all of the money that comes in via PayPal. She prints out that document and she enters all of the transactions into the QuickBooks Online. Yep. She handles all of my equipment follow-ups. So I actually process the beginning portion of the order and submit it to the supplier, but she does all of the follow-ups. She checks to make sure that the supplier got the order confirmation and that she gets the tracking. And if there's any customer service work that needs to be done, such as a return or anything like that, she's 100% in charge of that. I produce a ton of podcasts. I'm about ready to record my 3,000th podcast episode.
Ooh, this is exciting.
And so Stephanie, basically what I'll do is we record a lot of shows. And after I'm done, I just drop the recording into Dropbox and she takes it from there. She runs it through Adobe Audition with just one little process. Doesn't have to edit anything. She just runs one little process on it, adds my secret sauce, makes me sound like Barry White on the radio. But anyway, she runs that process on it. Then she renames the file, tags the file, uploads it to my media host, then posts it on WordPress, and then she puts it into our episode guide. So she does all of that for me. And she schedules all of my interviews. Like, for example, I know that she scheduled this interview with your assistant. So she handles that, so I don't have to worry about my calendar anymore. And she handles a lot of my consulting, scheduling, and things of that nature. And traveling as well. And she does anything else that is administrative that I might need, and it works extremely well.
Does she make you coffee and also breakfast as well?
She does. Oh yes, she isn't. She does also run the Ravenscraft Enterprises cafeteria. You know, Google Campus. They can't touch the cooks that we have here at GSPN.TV worldwide headquarters.
I love the sound of that. That is awesome. Well, it's been amazing to be able to speak to you about this, Cliff. It's just so much great content here, and I'm sure the listeners who are listening to this right now love every little aspect. Now, if they want to find out a little bit more about what you do, maybe take up some of your consulting services, or even purchase more stuff about podcasting and learn more about it, how can they get in contact with you on that side?
Sure. I'll tell you what, anybody who is interested in learning a little bit more about my story, there's a 1-hour video from my Blog World talk at NYC last year. That's at podcastanswerman.com/about. Before you think about buying anything from me, before you think about purchasing any tutorials or any of that other stuff, my recommendation, even if you're already into podcasting, is to go to learnhowtopodcast.com. It's 100% free. No strings attached. I don't even ask you for your email address. It is yours for the taking. It is the single best online video tutorial I've ever created. More than 40 to 50 hours of my life put into it, and it's free. Learnhowtopodcast.com. Go there, and then beyond that, I'm sure you'll find some way to get in touch with me.
Definitely. Well, I'll put those links down in the show notes here as well, and make sure that people can get access to that. I've seen all those videos myself. That's how I actually learned to put together a lot of my systems, and all my friends, Pat Flynn and Leslie Samuel, have also recommended those. So I'd highly recommend checking those out. And definitely get in contact with Cliff if you want to ask him any more questions as well. Yeah, do you also have a Facebook fan page as well? People can link into the community. No?
My brand is my personal life. So facebook.com/Cliff Ravenscraft is my personal profile. Yep. Feel free to go there and either request friendship. If I can get you in under the 5,000 mark, then I'll add you as a friend. Or just go ahead and hit
that too, Cliff, if it'll allow me in.
Or hit the subscribe button. Either way, but yeah, I love the fact that they added the subscribe feature on the personal profile. And honestly, I hang out all the time on Twitter. So twitter.com/GSPN stands for Generally Speaking Production Network. So twitter.com/GSPN. I would have Cliff Ravenscraft, but you can't fit it all in on they give you so many characters. Oh, yes. I can't get my full name. And I tried to get twitter.com/podcastanswerman, but I'd have to be twitter.com/podcast answer ma. M-A.
Oh, just one letter off. That's a real shame.
Yeah. But I've been on Twitter since February 2007. You can follow me, twitter.com/GSPN. I would love to interact with you there.
Awesome.
This is Outsourcing Live's Inside Info.
As I mentioned earlier inside this episode, we've been taking a lot more new clients on for our other side of business, which is mostly focused on helping businesses rank on the first page of Google, which is, in other words, SEO or search engine optimization for both video and also for websites. And what we've had to do was to set up a more of a centralized system where we could handle all the customer service and the support. And we actually set this up probably going back almost back in January now. It's actually been a few months, and I wanted to try it out first before actually recommending it. And I'm proud to say that I'm actually really, really happy to recommend this particular tool. And it's an amazing tool because it really, really does make life so much easier. It's simple, it's clean, and it works. And that's the most important thing. And this tool that I'm going to share with you right now is called Zendesk. Now, what is Zendesk? Zendesk is basically an online ticket support system that allows you to be able to send and receive tickets or support inquiries through this system. And it allows you to be able to track your customers and also send them tickets or emails, replies with specific number allocations. So that way you will never ever lose a ticket. I think gone are days are really very, very difficult to actually handle customer support via email. You can do it, but if you're getting hundreds and hundreds of inquiries on a regular basis, you won't be able to kind of keep the conversations going because you'll probably start to get lost, especially when you have a team around you that needs to manage all this. So with having a ticket support system like Zendesk, it streamlines everything and it allows you to be able to manage and also keep all your tickets all together inside and manage that particular customer. And you can assign it to different people inside your team. So if you've got a team of 4 or 5 people customer supporting your Zendesk, then it's very easy to assign it to different roles and people. And the beautiful thing is that you actually don't need very much and it doesn't actually cost very much. At this point in time, it's actually $20 for a whole year to be able to purchase this system. And it's if you go and check it out at zendesk.com, you'll be able to actually see how easy and simple it is. Now, for more advanced users, you can purchase up to higher plans depending on how many people you want to share the system with. But the basic user, like we've just set up with a $20 yearly plan, which is absolutely almost nothing, and it allows us to do so many things. One thing I love about it is that you can actually set up a customized domain and redirect it to basically your own thing. And you can actually check out my own ticket support system if you want to have a look at how it looks. It's basically ask N for Nelly, reply.com. And I'll make sure I put it down in the show notes for episode 35 so you can check it out here. And basically have a look at it. If you ever have contacted me, and I know that a lot of you who've been listening to me have contacted me, you probably have gone through this ticket support system already. And basically, it's probably one of the simplest and the easiest things to use. So I highly recommend if you haven't considered setting up a support system to be able to handle all your customer support, whether it be for a website or for customers, for any type of business you've got, then I highly recommend checking this out because it's probably the most simplest and the most cleanest and easiest way to be able to manage your whole customer support system.
Discover more resources to grow your business
inside Mass Outsource Mastermind.
Watch the video tutorials and follow the easy instructions to take your business to the next level. Start your 30-day